Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Bordetella pertussis podcast. I will be your host today, and my name is Lindsay Brown. I hope you'll learn something new and find it interesting on what microbes can cause in a human host. I'm going to start this podcast off by giving you a description of what we will be talking about and a little background information on a microbe known as Bordetella pertussis. So B. pertussis is what I'll probably be calling the Bordetella pertussis throughout the podcast, and it's just a shortened name for Bordetella pertussis. So B. pertussis is a microbe, like I already said, and there are many different species of Bordetella, but we'll be discussing pertussis. And so Bordetella pertussis is a gram-negative organism, and this is due to the cell structure and envelope. So when you're doing a gram stain, the crystal violet stain will not be held. This microbe can be responsible for many diseases, especially lower respiratory disease. The lower respiratory disease that we'll be talking about today is whooping cough. If you have not heard of whooping cough, you'll soon be informed of what it is. We will also discuss transmission of whooping cough, how the microbes cause disease, and incubation period, treatment, and self-morphology of B. pertussis. To start, we'll discuss the morphology of this microbe, and as we already stated that B. pertussis is gram-negative, and the morphology of the organism is cockeye, which means it's just oval and circle-shaped. So if you looked at Bordetella pertussis under a microscope, having done a gram stain, you would see a gram-negative, which would appear pink. And so you'd be basically viewing a cockeye that would be pink underneath the microscope. Whooping cough is a lower respiratory disease that makes it hard to breathe. It causes mucus to fill the airways, making it very difficult to breathe in. When you breathe in air, you're like taking big deep breaths, and that's what causes the whooping noise, is when you intake air. This disease is hard to diagnose at an early stage because of the symptoms resembling a common cold. Whooping cough has 3 stages, the first being catarrhal stage, then its proximal stage, and the third and final stage is convalescent stage. Catarrhal stage is you have a fever, you are sneezing, and vomiting is most likely to occur with a dry cough in this stage, and it's because of all the coughing that you're doing, you feel like you need to vomit. So during the stage, the symptoms are light because they do resemble a common cold, so they're not very severe. And then the proximal stage is when the mucus and bacteria fill the airways, and this causes the cilia to immobilize. The mucus in the airways causes the coughing. And then the third and final stage, convalescent stage, is where you're over the worst of the disease, thankfully, because you can somewhat start to breathe easier now. So in this stage, you have a mild cough that can last for several months, and you're also very prone to secondary diseases, and that secondary disease would be bacterial pneumonia. Whooping cough also comes with severe consequences. These consequences could include irreversible brain damage, pneumonia, lung collapse, and this is just a few listed. There's lots more that can occur from having whooping cough. So after hearing all this description of what whooping cough is and what exactly you will experience while having this infection, you're probably wondering how this disease is transmitted and how you can stay away from actually getting this disease. I'd be wondering the same thing. So I'm going to tell you there are treatments for this, which is on the bright side. But whooping cough is very contagious, and it's transmitted through droplets from someone that is infected with whooping cough, sneezing or coughing, and then those droplets getting onto you and getting into your respiratory tract. So this disease is communicable, which is just a fancy word saying the disease can be transmitted from one infected individual to another. So the good news is that there are treatments, like I said. There is a vaccination, but the thing with the vaccination is that it's not proven to be completely effective against whooping cough. So if you get the vaccination, you can still get whooping cough. And so you can take antitoxin, erythromycin, or azithromycin to help shorten the second stage, and these are like antibiotics, and it helps make the second stage not as awful without it, so it helps not making it so difficult, and it probably helps you breathe a little better because the antibiotics are helping you fight off this disease. And the antibiotics will also reduce how contagious the disease is, so it won't be as contagious and you're less likely to spread it to someone else, which is a good thing. So the symptoms of whooping cough will include a fever, runny nose, occasional cough, and apnea. Apnea usually only occurs in babies, and if you don't know what apnea is, it's like a long pause in breathing. So with apnea being only in babies, it's very dangerous for babies to get this because they pause in their breathing, can potentially die from it. So we don't want your babies to get whooping cough because that would be very bad. So these early symptoms are more than likely to be thought that it's a common cold, so it's very hard to say, oh, you have whooping cough, and get you on treatments to help you with it. But the later stage symptoms are rapid coughs with a whooping sound, vomiting, and exhaustion. The exhaustion comes from the coughing fits. After the disease is treated, the cough is still present but less dominant and not as frequent. So the incubation period for this disease is about 7 to 10 days. So you might not know that you're carrying B. pertussis on you, or you're a carrier and giving it to someone else, or you're going to end up with whooping cough in 7 to 10 days, so that's lovely. But next, we'll be discussing virulence factors, and for those of you who don't know what virulence factors are, they're molecules that bacteria, fungi, and protozoa produce. They essentially help the microbe to achieve adherence, entry in and out of the cell, and they do a lot more than just helping the microbe. But virulence factors that B. pertussis secrete include filamentous hemagglutinin, pertussis toxin, adenylate cyclase toxin, pertactin, and tracheocytotoxin. All these virulence factors help Bordetella pertussis infect a healthy host. So, for example, filamentous hemagglutinin moves the infection along by adhering to host tissue of respiratory tract, while the pertussis toxin is an exotoxin. It's a major factor in colonizing, which remains cell-bound. Just like filamentous hemagglutinin, pertactin helps with adhesion to host cell. Adenylate cyclase is one of the first virulence factors to be released. It allows entry into the cell. And last but not least, tracheocytotoxin is a cytotoxin which is responsible for immobilizing cilia, which is called ciliostasis. So that's just the scientific name for immobilizing cilia. So through the course of the infection, it adheres to ciliated epithelium, invades alveolar macrophages, which then rapidly multiplies on the mucous membrane and causes the infection. That's it for today's podcast, and I want to thank you for tuning into the Bordetella pertussis podcast, and your listening skills are much appreciated. I hope that you found this interesting and will share your knowledge with other people. As you heard, Bordetella pertussis is a very interesting microbe that can cause not such a fun disease. I hope none of us have to experience what whooping cough has in store. I encourage all of you to get the vaccination, even if it's not entirely effective. It'll do something to help you reduce your chances of getting it or reduce the symptoms that come along with it. Hope to see you tune in next time. We'll be discussing another microbe, which is to be determined. Your subscription will be greatly appreciated, and don't be hesitant about showing your friends today's podcast. Have a wonderful day. I am your host, Lindsay Brown. Thank you. P.S. If you're wanting to find my sources, please follow the attached paper below the podcast. Thank you.